Hey, Dave Molenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. As you know, each week I try to find the best people in the world to come up with some amazing information. And this week is no different. Now, the odd thing is that I had this super simple question that like spiraled me out of control to the point where I'm like, all right, I got to find the guy that asked this question and I got to get him on my show. So here's the question. Again, it's going to sound really simple up front and then think about it for a while. It's a rhetorical question, but the question is, what would success this week look like? And I thought about that and I'm like, oh my gosh, we all want to understand success, but then this guy put it into just this week and it was so like, I could understand it. I could relate to it. So I wanted to unpack that and some other stuff. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Ron Oltmanns. How are you today, sir?
I'm great, Dave. Thanks. It's good to be here.
Yep, absolutely. You're the president of Lead Skill Corporation. So tell us, what's Lead Skill Corporation?
Yeah, Lead Skill, we started this, I guess it was about 20 years ago now. And, coming out of I'd previously done other things. I started coaching and consulting, but my wife and I were focused a little more on things like market research and marketing type things. And then I moved into training and consulting with business owners, and it's just grown over time. And Lead Skill is really focused on helping leaders of small and medium-sized companies mostly to grow themselves, grow their own self-awareness, and then help their teams with greater emotional intelligence. So it's an inside job. You can't lead people places you haven't gone yourself. And so I help leaders take those, steps of courage really, and then help their teams to grow in the same way.
Oh, so there you go right away, Ron. You're already telling people not to listen because who wants to talk about self-awareness? I want to talk about my team and all their problems, right? But don't point that flashlight at me, brother. That's just not going to work. No, so that's why I'm super excited to be in this topic. We got a bunch of stuff to cover today, but to start with, I mean, I really was, taken aback by that this week comment in doing work and research for today. You asked the question of what would success this week look like? And I've heard hundreds and hundreds of people talk about success and what does it look like for you. You're the first person that actually was able to compartmentalize it for me in my brain to rather than what does it look like in 15 or 20 years from now, or the future, whatever that is, what does it look like this week? And I had to say, when I sat with that for a little bit, I did not have an answer. So, I'm just being vulnerable. I didn't have an answer. I'm like, you know what? I'm plugging through and I'm just trying to get to Friday. And, that's, I don't know if that's just me or the rest of the world, has that same potential. So when you created that question, I mean, where did that come from for you? Because to me, that was like really a relief.
I wish I knew, but Dave, I would say that to me is the sign of the right question finding us is whenever it hits us and we feel almost a mutual attraction and a repulsion. It's like, I don't have an answer right away, but I'm so curious, it's like, I want to dive in. I want to get to the bottom of that. And, a question like that, to me, it comes from, how do we take something, like you said, big success, 10, 15 years from now? We often think, go big or go home. And I get that, I'm that kind of person too. But how do it's so big and overwhelming. How do we chunk it down? Right. And so what does success this week look like? Makes us really focus. Okay, wow. If I just had this week and that's all that I've got to worry about, that's all I've got. In fact, what would I do with that? I mean, you can go even more. I mean, I don't necessarily encourage this, but you can say, what does success today look like? I mean, that's a good focusing question to plan out a day. But I think as a leader, we need a little more horizon. We need just a little bit, if you're staring at just today, you might only be tempted to do the firefighting that you and I both know is a real, it's time suck. It's a sink for a lot of leaders. So what does it look like this week? Wow. Okay. I've got 5 days, 7 days to work with. And how do I live it to the full and make this really work?
That's so cool. So then I'm assuming, Ron, we're kind of hanging out at the beginning of the week, looking ahead, trying to lay some things out that if these happen, success kind of would happen. And then do you also kind of at the end of the week look back and say, wow, that either was success or there's a couple things that I need to realign to make it success? I mean, do you get into, you personally get into that type of granular, and do you encourage your clients to do the same?
Yes and yes. So I do it for myself, and
Okay.
I'm right here in front of me. I've got one of my journals. I write, physically almost every day in a journal because it's a mindfulness exercise for me to just like, first of all, I pour out thoughts and feelings, what I'm dealing with in the moment, just to get
Sure.
my head clear. And
Sure.
then I also do some planning and thinking. And so if I will define for myself what success is going to look like this week, and then at the end of the week, here's where I am. Leadership to me is a constant process of saying, what am I trying to accomplish here?
Mhm.
And that almost inevitably is going to lead us to vision and something big, bigger than what we are currently experiencing, but that also creates a gap. And we have to take the measure of how big is that gap and what am I going to do to close it? And
Gotcha.
it's simply honesty, self-honesty at the end of the week to say, well, how did I do? Did I close the gap, or
Right.
how
Yep.
how much progress did we make toward this area?
Sure.
Was it, can I say 80% successful, 100%, 30%? It's like,
Sure.
if you're not measuring it, you're not really serious.
Right.
So
Interesting. And I think and that's where I think coaches like you come in and coaches like me come in, because I could look back in my week and go, oh my gosh, I nailed it. And I have all these blind spots along the way that I didn't see,
yeah,
that I offended somebody on my team or I lost
right,
a customer or whatever that
right.
it would look like. So that's where I'm assuming you come alongside your leaders then and try and help them through that. Is that one of the things that you're offering?
Yeah, so, results, we often define that too narrowly. We focus on financial measures or, number of widgets or number of hours sold or, like service levels, and define it for our business.
Sure.
We we define things too narrowly because, as you just referenced, so what if I'm getting the results, but I'm also having a team that's burnout, or I'm having a culture that is verging on being toxic,
Yeah.
or it is toxic. Let's just call it what it is,
Yeah.
because
Right.
people are just, it's like I'm driving them way too hard and I'm not valuing my people enough. That's not a good sign. And that's part of the results that you're producing too. And I think as leaders, we sometimes get hooked into thinking, well, that's not really results. That's just what I might call collateral damage. And we justify it
Sure.
instead of
Yep.
saying,
Yep.
man, results is everything that's showing up and I own it all. I need to, it's not like I'm going to blame myself or, go into a deep, dark hole and all that, but I need to, stop and I need to look in the mirror. And to me, that is the image I would say for self-awareness. You were teasing, I know, at the beginning about, chasing off listeners, talking about
Yep.
self-awareness, but
Yep.
self-awareness to me is just simply having a good mirror and taking time to look into it and say,
Sure.
do I like what I see?
Sure.
Or is this really what I want to have?
Right.
I before I came on the podcast, I kind of looked in the mirror and said, is my hair standing up? And did I shave and all that? So,
Yeah. Yep.
we do that every day for ourselves anyway.
Yep.
But as leaders, I think we need to start looking at our leadership style and our values, our beliefs even. It's like we need to take this down deep because those things are driving our results. And if we don't get leverage on those areas, we're either not going to produce the results we want, or we'll produce the results with all that collateral damage. And
Sure.
that's not a good place to be.
Well, and I think that let's just be real here for the group. It's way easier. Like I said, it's way easier to pick out your faults than it is for me to pick out mine.
Yeah.
So as a leader, if you're listening and I ask the question of ask your team, what is this? What's the environment here? What's the atmosphere? What's the culture? If you had to use some words for culture, I mean, if you're hearing words like toxic or stressful, those are warning signs.
Yes.
And I think that's where the self-awareness comes in, is we have to be aware of how we are as a leader, which really, I wanted to ask this question to you is, what happens when a leader does lack self-awareness? What ends up happening to the team? What ends up happening to the customer? And quite frankly, what happens to the leader? I mean, they all, to me, seem to end in the same place, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say, Ron.
Sure. And I want to jump into that question. Just give me like 30 seconds or a minute to lay a little bit of groundwork, because here's two things that I find really important for leaders to kind of get your head wrapped around for a second. I notice in both my coaching and in public, programs of training, when I have, I'm addressing groups of leaders, that if I can get people to close their eyes and like say, okay, show of hands, how many of you think you have above average self-awareness? Close your eyes. How many hands do you think go up? What percentage of hands in the audience?
80%, right?
80 to 90% of leaders would say they have above average self-awareness.
Yep.
But you and I both know that's a statistical impossibility, because only 50% could possibly be above average.
Right. Yep, exactly.
And so there is a blind spot. We as leaders very often think that we're better off than we really are, that we are above average, and we're not. And so that's that's a data point to gather. And you and I both use tools to help leaders get a real honest measure, an objective kind of like, so where are you on self-awareness? And there are ways that you can get to that. Yep. That's the first data point. And the second thing that I would add here is there's a Harvard Business Review article based on a lot of research that, by a woman, Tasha Eurich, who focuses on this very space, on self-awareness. And she says very often as leaders, we ask ourselves, the question, and we overrate ourselves. She says it's more on the order of like 85% of people actually give themselves higher scores on things like self-awareness than if you were to ask other people like a 360 or, your team, and get their input. And so it's like, oh, wow, that is really striking. So to get, your question that you asked, what's the consequence for leaders lacking self-awareness? I mean, if I can just state it, let's just call the BS. People are going to live with illusions. Leaders are going to be under illusions. One illusion is I'm good. It's the rest of people that are messed up. It's the world that's messed up. It's the people. If I could just hire better people, it's like, but I'm stuck with these people. And it's strange because I grew up as the son of a boss. My dad owned his own repair shop, heavy industrial equipment. I hung out around the shop, and so he had mechanics. He called them hands, but I hung out with the mechanics. I learned how to do a brake job on a semi truck, an 18-wheeler, even before I had a driver's license. Nice. And I remember hearing, and my dad was in business with my uncle. I remember them talking about how hard it was to find good hands, good mechanics. And so there was this conversation about, man, it's just hard to get people who will work for you, work really hard, own their job and do a good job for the customer. And, at the time I just thought, that's the way it is. But as I became an adult and I started working in the business world, I started seeing like, that's a leadership conversation of actually saying maybe the labor market is, a certain way, but I also can make choices about who I hire and how I train them, how I treat them. And we can have a little different culture here that's not representative of the wider labor market, right?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
if a leader's not self-aware, they're going to be under the illusion like, I'm good, but it's those other people are messed up.
Yeah. Well, and that's the cool part about self-awareness is that's one of those things that you can improve. It's not like you're stuck with it, your rest of your whole life. You just have to live with that or walk with a limp or whatever. You can improve your self-awareness.
Sure.
And that's the cool part. To Ron's point, is there's a starting point. So, Ron and I both use, TTI assessments, and EQ is one of those. So you take this assessment, you answer some questions, and it's like the magic 8-ball, out comes all these answers. The
Sure.
difference is they're really customized to the way that you are. And so if you see yourself lacking self-awareness, now you go to the next page and there's a whole list of things that are there. Now I can say that, Ron said a word that is probably taboo for a lot of entrepreneurs, and that's journaling, because, who has time to do that? Ron, I got to make payroll. I got to sell. I gotta, right? So, that's the first thing about this is like, that's the self-awareness. If you're not even able to slow yourself down to take an assessment. I've had people say, I'm too busy to take an assessment. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
What are you going to do
Right.
at that point? Right. I mean, it's like, okay, well, thanks for talking to me. You should be talking to me now because you need to get going. You got something you got to do. So,
Right.
but I'm just curious, for you on that journaling side, because, that is kind of an important piece of of the EQ, is to kind of journal your journey, so to speak. What are some things that because I know you write like crazy. You're the one person that I know that writes more than anybody else that I've ever met. And you were talking about books and books and books of writing. And I was just like, man, obviously you said it keeps your head clear. What are some things that, what are some simple things that we that don't journal could journal, about, just to kind of get us started to see if it's a habit that we want to keep moving forward
I'm
with?
really glad you asked that. I did a YouTube video on this. I have a YouTube channel as well. And, I talk about mindful journaling, and I make a fundamental distinction that there are two different ways that you can be writing. Now, writing is daunting for some people because they think, I don't know what to do with a blank sheet of paper or, a blank page in front of me. What do I do?
Yeah.
Well, I would say drop by, local store, whether it's a grocery store, Walmart, Target, whatever. It's like, and pick up one of those 50-cent composition books that's in the school, supplies aisle or in the stationery. Something really inexpensive, 50 cents, $1, maybe 50 cents is too cheap anymore, but you can
right
find
here, right? These
there
are
you
the
go.
ones. Right?
There you go. You got one, Dave.
Yep.
Well, I would say for that, I call it a junk journal. And here's what you do with a junk journal is when you sit down, you just start writing and you set a timer, like set 5 minutes. Maybe that's not too ambitious in the beginning,
Sure.
but set a timer. And the goal is keep the pen moving for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be grammatical, what you write. You don't even have to lift your pen or put, periods or commas or anything. It's just write. And you might even be writing stuff like, gosh, this is so stupid. Why am I doing this? I feel so silly as I'm writing this out because, some guy asked me to do it and said 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I mean, who can do this for 5 minutes? You know what? Write all of that stuff out. It's all the mind noise.
Sure.
And if you will stick with this as a discipline, just do for 5 minutes. Now, I think 10 minutes is even better, but if you'll just get your junk out of your head, it's there anyway. If you'll write it out, it does two things. One, it helps you see, man, I got a lot of junk. But you will find, this is meditation, but a lot of people find meditation daunting too, because it's like, I'm just sitting there and then my thoughts just go racing and wild. And I'm like, that's non-productive for me. I will not do that. But, doers want to do something. And if you put your hand to work and it's doing something, it's writing out all your thoughts. One, you'll find that you can't write fast enough because all the stuff is spilling out.
Sure.
And then if you'll take it beyond the thoughts and say, what you're feeling, I feel stressed, and I'm, this is, I can't believe all the things that I got to do today. And, Judy, why isn't Judy giving me the books and
Yeah.
the things that I need to look over for I'm really wondering about this. Judy is always late, and as you start thinking about that, you might be reflecting and say, well, why is Judy always late? Is it, oh, you know what? She's often complaining that I'm late and getting stuff to her so that she
Sure.
can't, get
Yeah.
our accounts receivable and accounts payable and everything posted. And that's
Yeah.
why we're perpetually late. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. That traces back to me. It's not Judy's fault. It's my fault. And if you do junk journaling, and I say do one of these cheap journals because it's a great place. It's not to read. No one else needs to see it. And maybe you, after you've written it, it's something you could throw in the trash. Honestly, it's like, because those are just junk thoughts.
Sure.
I've got a second kind of journaling that I call mindfulness journaling, where I try to buy expensive journals. And by that I mean something that, $15, $20, $40, whatever, but it's like book quality, because I want to put quality thoughts there.
Gotcha.
And when I'm doing mindfulness journaling, it's what I call genius time. I'll set and I usually have prompts, like questions already set, where I'll journal about things that I'm supposed to be thinking on a deeper level about this. So leaders, I've taken the lead from other quality people who have talked about, we're talking about running multi-billion-dollar companies.
Yeah.
And they said, I took a week off or 2 weeks off, went to my cabin up in the mountains. And that is think time. That's when I'm just working on the business, and I'm working on things that are high leverage. And it's like issues that I never have time to work on when I'm firefighting. And I'm going to do think time. Well, you don't have to wait for 1 week or 2 weeks out of the year to go up to the cabin. You can do that every week. Sure. So what does success look like this week? Might look like I'm going to spend one day doing some quality think time and journaling and writing thoughts that are valuable enough that I want to go back and look at. Dave, as I've done this, I've actually written several books that have not been published. I've written other books that I've published, but I've written books that aren't published. Yeah. That I'm like, I want to go back and read those, because there's gems in there. There's gold in there. And, it's like, I actually get excited about bringing these concepts, these ideas out to people in the marketplace. Sure. And the only reason I'm better at it than other people is because I practiced. Yeah. And so you got to start somewhere. You got to get going, and then you'll notice the snowball effect takes hold.
Wow. Well, and you touched on something I think that we often overlook. We hear a lot about working on the business versus working in the business. Right. And I have to say that, probably the last couple of years gave us a little bit more time to reflect and to work, hopefully, on the business. If you as a business owner and entrepreneur that are listening right now aren't working on your business, who is? Exactly. It's like, that's the problem is, we make an assumption. That's our blind spot. Everything's fine. And I think about a car, and my car, when there's no dashboard lights on, I think everything's good, but the oil light, warning light, check engine, tires, whatever, if we wait until that time, I feel like it's a little bit too late. That's kind of why we do oil changes and the 26-point inspection. Who is doing the 26-point inspection on your business? Probably, if you're not doing it, who else? Nobody else is doing it, and I hate seeing companies that are too far gone. I was working with one that I was volunteering to help them because they had no money, to pay. So I took it on as a social cause, and they were just too far. It was just too far gone to try and fix. And, it's like when the warning light went on, it's almost like you said, it's probably getting too late. So are you helping people try and work that on the business type thing? Is that a pretty consistent pattern for your people?
Yeah. And I will say that one of the signs of a leader who is serious about this is they actually realize working on the business starts with working on me. Yeah. So it's,
here you go again, Ron. Come on, let's just bypass this. Come on.
I know. but it's, the cliche is, yeah, you got to work on the business, not just in the business. And
Right.
it's just a cliche if you don't do something about it and start working on the business. And what that looks like maybe you need to redesign your process,
Right.
redesign your hiring process, redesign your customer onboarding process.
Yep.
Think a little bit more about how do we bring people into our business and give them a better experience from day one.
Sure.
I had to do this just this week. I admitted I'm weak on operations. I just am. And I have a business partner, and she asked me about, hey, we've had customer sales over the last several months. We sell products too, as well as, our coaching services. We have
Sure.
products. It's part of our business. And she said, how's that coming with the follow-up with customers? I said, follow up with customers? It was like, and I said, yeah, I did that a couple of months ago, but
Yeah.
I wasn't current. And she goes,
I did that once.
we need to be like sending them these emails like 1 week after they've made a purchase, and making sure everything's good with them, and asking for reviews online and all this sort of stuff. And I said, I've got the perfect template for that, but I've not been operationalizing it. And so she got after it, and she got in touch with every one of our customers from the last 90 days, in fact.
Okay.
And after she'd gone through like these, I think there were about 50 of them, she said, man, that felt good. And you know what? She said that, but inside I was thinking to myself, man, that feels good, to have it taken care of. But that's
exactly.
working on the business, because I have a broken system there.
Yeah.
I haven't made it automatic. And I was the bottleneck. And sometimes as leaders, we haven't delegated, or we haven't hired the right person, because I don't have the skill set to operationalize. I'm a big picture thinker. I innovate. I see, what needs to be done. But as far as rolling up my sleeves and doing it day in, day out, I'm not good at repetitive work.
Yeah.
Now, I still have to do some of that. You can't just dismiss it and say it's not going to get done. But I can't consistently cover all parts of the business that need that done.
Yeah. Wow.
And as
That's
a leader,
really deep.
we've got to, cover up for our, not just blind spots, but also our weak points.
Yeah, that's really deep. And that's where I think, I'm curious how you give leaders a picture of their strengths and their weaknesses, because, again, I don't know what I don't know, number one. And number two, like, I know I am horrible at accounting. I don't enjoy it. I almost use the word hate by it, but I don't want to use that word. I do not enjoy accounting. Therefore, I have people to do that for me, because I just, that's the self-awareness that's an easy self-awareness, Ron, because, when you don't like something and you're able to pay somebody to do it, that's great. Those are the easy ones. When you get a little bit into, like you just said, you're not good at a system, or, I do a lot of work with sales professionals. What does your follow-up look like? And they kind of do that blank stare with, I'd rather call a new prospect than follow up with an old one. There's all these different things. So I'm just curious, how do you help leaders get that picture of their strengths and their weaknesses? Do you use tools? Are they involved in that process? Tell me how that works.
Sure. So I've got the basic, or the, what I call basic isn't probably the right word, even though I think basic gets a bad knocks, because basic is base. It's like we all need a good base. If you don't have a good base that you're standing on, things are shaky.
Sure.
And it's like you don't want to be without a good base. So make friends with basic. And I learned this in martial arts. I've been practicing Aikido, a Japanese martial art, for more than 20 years. I'm a second-degree black belt in it.
Holy cow. Well, Jiminy, thanks for telling me now. That's,
well, so don't worry. It's just, if we go to the seedier parts of town, you don't need to worry so much.
Yeah, I'm going to go there with you for sure. Well, you'll take care of yourself. They'll just beat me up. So I get it.
here's the thing. It gets back to what we talked about. Preventative is much better than retroactive. So the thing is, don't go to the seedy parts of town if you can avoid it. Don't be in the wrong place at the wrong time and,
Sure.
after hours. And that's why I
Yep.
tell my, teenage sons is like,
Yeah.
don't be out after midnight because things get crazy.
Yeah.
That's
Not a lot of positive happens after midnight, right?
Exactly.
Not a lot of churches are still open. So,
No.
you know,
Okay, so let's get to your question. How do I help leaders get a picture of strengths and weaknesses? I like the word picture because we are visual and we need
Yep.
to see something in front of us. It just makes more of an impression. So part of the basic process, I'm going to have every leader take like a profile survey of their own makeup, because this is one of my core beliefs, Dave, that people deserve to know what makes them tick. It's just basic. It's like if I'm struggling to understand myself and someone can come along and show me what's going on,
yep.
wow, it's like it's a huge lift. It gives me so much leverage.
Right.
And so I want to give that to every leader. It's like I want them to see kind of the basic, operating tendencies that they have, that they do happen to be direct, or they
Right.
are a very reserved person, even though their role has, it makes them have to go out and make contact with people, but inside they're reserved, and that's perfectly okay. It's okay to be an introvert. There's no dirty secret about that.
Right.
You have to make allowances in your rhythm. I want people to understand what they value and what they're naturally drawn to, and to realize also that that's not what everyone else is drawn to. And so you need to get that sort of a sense. And so we have a process, we have a set of tools. Trimetrics is the particular tool that I use to help people get a snapshot, a picture of where they are. And then we can spend months coaching just on those 70 odd pages of that report, talking about strengths, weaknesses, tendencies, things buried under the surface that very few people see. Sometimes leaders don't even know it themselves.
Yeah.
There's a second part of the process that I call basic plus, or it's a little more it's value add. If some leaders have a little larger organization, they don't just directly manage everyone in the business, but they have a layer or two layers between them. They've got management.
Sure.
It's really valuable, especially as you can't touch everyone in the business, that you start getting a picture from everyone as much as you can. And that's where a 360 comes in. Some leaders they don't ask me to do a 360. I usually have to offer it or even urge it, like, you need this, So I'm thinking like this hospital administrator up in the Northwest in Washington State, small community hospital. They had like, several hundred employees there, but he said, I really need kind of this holistic picture of what people are thinking and saying, and, how well I'm doing as a leader. And so we did a 360 for him to give him that holistic view and hear feedback from people that they know it's anonymous. It's not tracked back to them. They can just, say all the stuff that I wish they would come into his office and say to his face.
Exactly.
They just are too intimidated and they won't, but they will open up if we'll give them a forum and a process. And so doing 360s is a valuable thing. I don't do it for all leaders, but for those who are up for it and the situation calls for it, absolutely we'll do that.
That's awesome. So that 360 is really kind of helping people all around that leader understand their strengths and their weaknesses. That's why they call it.
You can send it to people in your organization, but I encourage include some of your customers, and not just your good old boys, not just the people that you like and who like you, but like key customers, but maybe include some of the people that you aren't so close to, because you need to hear from them, especially the ones who are quiet. They usually they're actually going to complete a survey on you and give you valuable feedback that you haven't heard otherwise.
Wow,
so customers too, suppliers. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you can do that. And the valuable thing, we don't do it for this purpose, but it's actually a good PR exercise too. because it gives a leader an excuse to get out and touch different parts of the business and the larger ecosystem that they're part of.
Sure.
And it's often a conversation piece like, why are you doing that? Well, let me tell you. And a lot of leaders, 90%, I'd say, don't want to go there. They want to keep it as quiet and private as possible.
Yeah.
But I coach them and I say, look, lean into this, because what you don't realize is it's going to up the perception of what your business is doing, and that you take this stuff seriously. And you will be surprised by the number of people who will say, man, I wish I had the guts to do that. Or you know what, we should be doing what you're doing here.
Right. Yeah.
And it really builds connections in ways that people haven't ever foreseen.
Well, and I was just with a client yesterday, and we talked about surveying the customer, and I was shocked at the resistance that I got, Ron.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy. I don't know. And I've been with them for a long time, and I know their company really well. So it wasn't like they have a bad image. It wasn't like they were going to get some bad feedback. I don't know what they were, what's normally the hesitation that you've seen for people not wanting to know either the 360 or the customer? Why would I not want to know what a customer has?
There's two things that come up right away for me, Dave. One is they have done some, I'd say, customer, feedback research, because there are firms out there pitching companies all the time at say, oh, you need to do this. And it's a really good salesperson, people get on board with it, and they've tried it. Sure. And it's sometimes done poorly, or the amount of insight they get is very superficial. But you know what? If you're going to asking for customer feedback, you need to go in expecting that probably 80% of the feedback is going to be negative, because most people are going to use it to voice their complaints. Sure. And you know what? No one wants to hear the bad news. No one wants to hear the negative, stuff.
Right.
But if you go into it kind of expecting that and knowing that that's what's going to come back at you, you're steeled for it, and you're ready to receive those gems. Because even in the negative stuff, there's usually things that are like, I don't like to hear it, but it's so true. I need, that's true for our business. And you will get those one or two outliers that are like people saying, man, you guys are doing great, and we love it. And so those are kind too. But anyway, that's one reason, is people have tried something and the process wasn't really good, or it didn't give, deep, insights. Sure. Second of all, people are just not ready, like I said, for the negativity. And sure. It's like, you know what? We get complaints already. And if people are telling the truth, they just don't want to take the hits.
Sure. Gotcha. Okay. And that's where it's like, I'd much rather, I look at a complaint as a gift. And I'd much rather, get it now when I can change it, rather than get it later when the customer's already migrated. And that's what's so unique, is people wait till there's a migration of customers before they make any changes. And that's when it's too late, so either way it happens. Either way, there's a negative there. So go ahead.
Sorry, I was jumping in, but I'm excited about this, because it's like I mentioned about my 7 beliefs, and I mentioned one to you already, which is the first one. Every leader deserves to know what makes them tick. But the 7th one, the last one, one of my core beliefs that I operate from is that the truth is going to get out. The truth is going to find its way out. And it's so much better if you choose when it gets out. Because here's the thing, bad PR, let's say a scandal breaks, or, it's like I'm in Houston, all right? And I remember right around a couple years ago, we had bad Hurricane Harvey, lots of flooding in town. And there was this chemical plant that had a fire, and things are bad. I mean, toxic stuff going into the environment is really, really bad situation. Yeah. Well, it came to light that, they were probably doing some improper things previous to all this. And the hurricane, no one can foresee that, but it's still, it surfaced that, hey, you weren't doing the best in terms of safety practices. Right. So the thing is, like, the truth is going to come out. It's so much better to choose when And so just like whether it's personal scandal, whether it's something in your business, we often want to sweep things under the rug, or we want to kick the can down the road and we'll deal with that later. We'll deal with that someday. Well, you know what? When someday comes up and you didn't choose it, and the media is putting a microphone in your face and wanting comment, and it's like, that's not the right time. I mean, of course, deal with the truth. You have to.
Sure. Yep.
It's so much better if you get ahead of the story. If you proactively go after it, you just hold your nose. It's like, I'm about to wade into a stinky pile of it. But you know what? If I choose this, I'm in control to a certain degree, versus I've got to be totally reactive and I'm going to look like deer in the headlights and it's just going to go badly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think personally, taking the initiative to call a customer before, and I've had to learn this the hard way, they're either going to call, if there's a problem, either they're going to call you and complain. And by then, it's probably too little. It's getting to be close to too late because you weren't proactive and took care of it.
Right.
Or they don't call you and they just leave. I mean, that's the sad part, is 2 out of 3 customers that leave a company, they leave because they don't feel like you care. I mean, it's not the competitor wooing them. It's not a price deal. It's because the number was 68% of customers don't think that you care. And that's where it's crazy as leaders, so thanks for sharing that. There are 7 beliefs. If we wanted to find those, where would we find those, on a website, or where would we find those from you?
Yeah, I've actually got them listed on my personal. I've got ronoltmanns.com. I've got a place where I put those, just because I want to be transparent. I want to put things out there, and I like I said earlier, I don't want my coaching clients to think that I'm, sitting back as the consultant telling them all the great things they need to do, and I haven't done any of it myself, or I haven't done most of it. And the point is, like, I want my clients to articulate their beliefs, their core beliefs. And so I need to do it too. And I need to revisit it, which, every so often. I've got more than 7 core beliefs. So there are some that are personal to me, some that I don't need to share out there in public, but it's like, I need to be crystal clear about where I'm coming from. And so, I've put those out. And one of those that I didn't reference here, but it's like, I believe that play and joy are things that, add spice to life. I mean, and we need to have more of that in the workplace. It shouldn't just be like drudgery, or like people are like, gotta go to work today. If you surprise your employees or your customers and you bring a little bit of play or joy, this is emotional intelligence, but it's like, man, you can totally change the whole, like we were talking about culture, or like your podcast, your positive polarity. Folks, if you've got a lot of negative, how about go to the opposite pole, go to the positive, and bring something that gives a lift to people's day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, Ron, because in the past I've actually had I brought in a chair massage lady into some of my clients.
I like it.
And oh my gosh, it's so funny. Like, I say, hey, this lady's going to be here for the morning, sign up for your 15-minute deals. And everyone's looking at me at first and nobody wants to do it. Right. Well, there's always 1 or 2 people that are like, screw this, I'll do it. Right. So they get in there and then they come out and they're just like, oh my gosh, that just changed my life. And all of a sudden it gets wind around the office. And before you know it, everybody's down there, But I think that there's so much stress that is going on. There's so much, negativity going on, and that can really have an effect. So we can either let that rule us, or we can combat that with some of the positive things, which is awesome. As we start to land today, I wanted to ask you about the emotions wheel, because I know that, we're talking about positive, negative, joy. We're talking about fun. We're talking about these different things. So, you created, I believe, this emotions wheel, or you perfected this. So tell us what that is and how that helps us.
Sure. I'll tell you what, can I put this on the screen and share it at least with those who are watching video?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So I've got this wheel, and then for those of you listening, I would just ask you, there's 8 points around the wheel. And this is based on, research done by Robert Plutchik. a leading psychologist. He's passed on, but he left us this great body of work. And so there's a real logic to the wheel. And Plutchik came up with these things by studying animals as well as humans, and says there's common biology here. Whether it's an animal or a human, animals get happy just like humans get happy. Animals have sad and down times just like we do too. And he arranged these things on opposite ends of the spectrum. For example, happy and sad. Right? No one would argue that those are opposites. Or anger versus fear. Angry is a very forward leaning, kind of make yourself big, kind of look dominating and mean.
Sure. Yep.
When you're afraid, though, you have a tendency to shrink back, make yourself small. You want to go hide. In fact, it's like there's a reason in biology that, when the big bad bear comes around, why did the little animals go scurrying, into the holes and, finding a place to hide? It's fear, right? Because you're not going to get eaten.
Yeah.
Well, same thing in the workplace. Whenever the boss starts throwing their weight around, people go hide, don't they?
Yeah.
In fear. So there's happy, sad, there's anger, there's fear, there's trust versus disgust. So think about those. Trust is a very positive emotion. Disgust is, man, I'm just done with it. I hate that.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Yeah.
We turn up our nose at things. And then there's surprise and anticipation. Surprise is kind of like when you're startled and you kind of draw back like, oh, I didn't expect that.
Yep.
Anticipation is something that we are expecting. We're looking forward to it. We're leaning in and like, oh, goody. It's like after the chair massage made its first rounds, if that ever comes back,
oh yeah,
people are anticipating and they're looking forward to it.
Second time around, Ron, to your point, it was way different. They were super excited and they were looking forward to it. And I realized that I should play this out and it's going to be not tomorrow, but it's going to be a few weeks so that there is that anticipation, because I think that's a real positive way to reward your team. It partially is that anticipation too.
I would just say, Dave, for people who are listening, I've got some YouTube videos on this. If you just, look up Lead Skill, my company, and also Emotions Wheel or Feelings Wheel, okay, you'll find them in the, top search results there. But I explain the Feelings Wheel and even kind of tell a little bit of the story of how I went on a search when I was dissatisfied with the different tools I found out there and why I designed my own based on Plutchik's model. And that's one of the things that we've had a lot of success selling is, people who are coaches or consultants or therapists even are buying our Feelings Wheel and sharing it with their customers. And, we sell posters as well as digital downloads and things like that. So we've got a basic wheel, the 8 that I just mentioned, the way they're laid out, it's like a compass.
Sure.
And whether compass is kind of old fashioned, right? We use GPS, but it's like, if you're heading north, if you're headed toward Happy Land, that's a good place to be.
Sure.
But you know what? Even if you're headed south, even if things are really sad, if you can name where you are, it gives you a sense of like, okay, it's not like I'm completely lost.
Right.
And, again, research backs this up. If you can name your feeling, if you have a specific name for it, you're able to manage it better. And that's what emotional intelligence is about, is not just being aware, but starting to manage or regulate yourself. And the emotions wheel or the feelings wheel helps us in that process. I mean, you start with basic, like these 8, but I've got a 48, emotion wheel. I've got 128 different words and emotions based on the basic directions. And then you find a more specific or more granular way of, describing, like, it's not just anger. I feel annoyed. Yeah. Annoyance is different from feeling rage or aggressive. Each one of those is a little different shading.
Sure. Yep, for
sure.
And
it calls for a different management strategy.
Wow. Well, I was totally intimidated when I saw there was over 100. You had that one with over 100 words on it. I'm like, oh my gosh, we can't jump into those 100. So, but if there is somebody listening that's like intrigued by that, it's lead skill, leadskill.com, correct?
Yeah. Thanks for that.
So that's awesome. Well, hey, you know what? This has been awesome. And I want to encourage everybody that's listening. You know what? My goal each week is to bring something to you that allows you to hopefully challenge where you're at, potentially try and, change a behavior. And one of the behaviors that I hear, I'm looking at this 5-minute journal thing. I'm going to try it. So, thanks for sharing that. And again, I just encourage people, rather than just go on to your next podcast, rather than just go on to the next activity, is to really let this sink in and think of one thing that Ron shared today that you can implement into your life, because that's why this is so darn important. Because otherwise, you know what, if you stay on the same path and nothing changes in your life and you're not where you want to be ultimately, you can't get mad at Ron or I, because we did our best today to share with you that piece. And so Ron, if somebody wants to learn more about you, if they want to get in contact with you, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
So you gave my website, and you can find contact information there at leadskill.com. That's a great one. I'm pretty active on Twitter and LinkedIn, and so you can find me there. I'm sharing things just about every week. I tweet daily, so I've got things that I share there, and so follow social channels if that's something that you do. Now, I also know we can waste a lot of time on social media. So I would say if you've got your self-regulation muscle working, then go for it there. In fact, Dave, I'd just say the one thing, I'm glad you got a lot of value out of the 5 minutes. I'm guessing there's people who've hung on with us this far, and they're still looking for, man, I haven't heard anything yet that it's like I can do, that's like doable.
Sure.
And I would say, here's my parting shot for you.
Okay.
Something that takes even less than 5 minutes, something that you can do in 30 seconds or less. And again, like you said at the top of the hour, it's the basic stuff like, what does success look like this week? Simple question, but very powerful if you rest with it. Something you've probably heard, but if you're not doing it, you're not getting the benefit. Simple. Breathe. Take deep breaths. And I would say in 30 seconds, you can take at least 3 deep breaths. And here's the thing, don't rush them. Take your deep breaths, at least 3.
Yeah.
Start doing this every day. It's a tremendous way to regulate your emotions, to do a reset. And I will, as a leader, if you will start doing this for yourself, and then actually just embrace, go full bore, lean into the embarrassment, because you're going to feel embarrassment. I'm going to predict this, or resistance to what I'm about to say, but it's like, lead your people to do some breathing before your next meeting. Say, okay, guys, before we jump into things, let's take a moment just to breathe, because things are stressful around here. Yeah. And before we jump in and we just race into the next thing, let's take 3 deep breaths. Let's just feel what we're feeling, and then we're going to be in a better place. You know what? You get oxygen into the brain on a biological level, you're in a better place. You're more resourceful. Your body is going to relax into whatever you're doing next. And so if you'll do some deep breathing, even if you can't write for 5 minutes, anyone can take 3 breaths in 30 seconds. Do it and make it a regular practice. It will change your day.
That's awesome. So here's the deal. Here's the warning. If that works and it helps you, then remember, it was my idea. If you breathe and pass out or hyperventilate, then it was Ron's
idea.
Okay? I just want to put that parting shot in there. So I just want to cover myself for insurance purposes. So no, that's awesome. I mean, I've been learning more about breathing as well. And it's just crazy. I mean, simple things like make sure you drink enough water and make sure that you breathe. I mean, these simple things, we're always looking for these complex 100 and some words on a wheel like you're talking about. It starts with these simple pieces. So if you're able to do 5 minutes of journaling today, fantastic. If you can't, but you can do 30 seconds of breathing, either one of those you're improving your day, and you're able to say, you know what, I successfully did that this week, which is exactly where we started. So Ron, thank you so much for all this information. Thanks for hanging out with us, and always enjoy learning from you, and I will continue to learn as long as you let me. So I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you.